baseball, basketball, and football. This is True Sports, a TrueChat original podcast with your host, Caleb Spinner.
Okay, after another potentially fatal crash was avoided at this year's Daytona 500, NASCAR breathes a sigh of relief. Almost 2 decades after the same race claimed the life of Dale Earnhardt Sr., the racing organization is receiving praise for the revolutionary changes it instituted since 2001. Those changes might have saved a man's life in this case, driver Ryan Newman. What did NASCAR change, and how can other sports leagues, particularly the National Football League, learn from them? Those are the questions we will answer today. Joining us is Devin Jackson, a digital multimedia journalist and content producer at WTAJ-TV in Pittsburgh. While his home is in Steelers country, Devin is a faithful follower of the New Orleans Saints. Thanks for joining us, and welcome to the show, Devin.
Hey, thanks for having me on. I'm definitely excited to be here and be a part of the show. And like you said, I'm a Saints fan. I'm in Steeler country, and people love their Steelers here. But I'm excited to be on the show, excited to talk sports with you, and I'm looking forward to it, man.
As we mentioned, you are a Saints fan. I'm pretty sure you're over the moon right now that Drew Brees said he's coming back for another year.
Yeah, exciting news for sure. There was a lot of talk of him possibly retiring at the end of last year, and the way that really the last 3, playoff runs have ended. It's kind of surprising to see him come back. I mean, but then again, he wants to win and wants to capture another Super Bowl. So, here's to another year, hoping that he can help deliver that. I think him missing 5 games last year definitely helped with him, coming back this year, because he didn't have to exert himself the full 16 games. Had that 5-game break in between, and, Teddy Bridgewater was able to hold it down during those times. But we'll see. Hopefully, he continues to play at a high level. I think it's him and Tom Brady playing at such a high level at their advanced ages is unprecedented. But it'll be exciting to see, what the Saints can do this season, with him back at the helm. They'll definitely have a shot for sure, but we'll see what kind of pieces they bring in around them.
You mentioned Tom Brady. He loves to win. He's coming off an embarrassing loss in the first round of the playoffs. All this talk of him changing teams, it doesn't sound like Tom Brady to me. I think he's going to want to win with the Patriots, go out with a bang, so to speak, in New England. I don't think he's going anywhere.
Yeah, I think, especially this late in his career, I get if the Patriots don't want him back, but they haven't said that they don't intend to not sign him back or anything like that. It's someone that has brought them, they're helped bring them Super Bowl rings and has really built a legacy there in Boston and just in that whole region of building a winning culture. And I'll see him going to another team and having to essentially start over. While I think he can still be successful elsewhere, there's nothing quite like having that relationship with like Bill Belichick, Robert Kraft. Just this day and age, I get if the Patriots don't want him back, but they've made it clear to him and to everyone that's involved in the situation that they want him back and want him in the New England Patriot uniform.
Yeah, in case you haven't heard of Ryan Newman's accident in the Daytona 500 just a couple days ago, I believe it was last week, Newman was leading the race when he was bumped from behind, lost control of his car, and spun out, went head on into the wall. It was a crash that was eerily similar to the one that killed Dale Earnhardt Sr., as we mentioned in 2001, 19 years prior. The vehicle smashed into the outer wall of the track, flipped on its roof, and caught fire. Newman was rushed to a local hospital where he received treatment for several non-life-threatening injuries. He was discharged from the hospital miraculously with no injuries and making a full recovery only 2 days after the accident. Devin, what was your initial reaction to the accident?
I was worried about his health and safety. I mean, things like I was talking to a coworker earlier in the week that, NASCAR is a pretty dangerous sport. I mean, you're driving at high speeds, going around these curves. I mean, one wrong move, one little bump can be fatal. And it's just shocking. I mean, it's kind of the nature of the sport. Accidents happen. But when you see something like that where it is torn to shreds and, it's starting to leak, the oils from the car are starting to leak, you really start to wonder, is he going to be okay or not,
Yeah, absolutely. What about you, JD?
Well, I saw the video actually the day after. I heard a lot about it, but I'm not really big into NASCAR, so I didn't watch the race per se. But I did watch the video of the crash on Twitter, and I thought for sure that he wasn't going to make it out of that crash. I mean, the similarity to Dale and Earnhardt's crash, it was uncanny. And you really have to thank NASCAR's, their safety regulations for saving his life, because if this crash would have happened maybe 10 years ago, I don't think Ryan Newman's walking away in this crash at least 2 days after it happened. Now, maybe a month down the road, or, maybe 4 months down the road, but never 2 days after the accident. So just the fact that he was able to get up and walk out of the hospital with his two daughters was pretty amazing.
So you think the statement that these safety regulations or the safety additions that NASCAR made did save his life?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I mean, someone crashes like this, like I said, 10 years ago, they're not walking away.
Now, Devin, one of the big things we're going to talk about in just a minute is a device called the Hans system, which essentially restricts drivers' head movement in the car in events of a collision like this. What can professional football, a game widely criticized for its lack of player safety regulations, what can they learn from NASCAR and this device?
That, truly look for the best interest in your athletes or the people participating. I think that the NFL at times offers best interest of itself. For example, the movie Concussion came out a while back, and the NFL tried its best to really not sweep under the rug, but really discount it and say, this is not how things are done in the league. This is not the culture around it. I think the XFL really has, I don't want to say soft, but made it more, safe. You're starting to see less injuries on kickoffs. I mean, granted, it's only been a couple of weeks, but the way that they kick you off, for people that don't know, they have both teams lined up, both teams, receiving and kicking team line up 5 yards apart, and they can't move until the runner starts moving and makes their movement. It really comes down to how serious they're going to take head injuries and investing the money into that and continue trying to get the best products, best helmets that are, sturdy enough where players aren't getting as many concussions. But in all honesty, I mean, the football is so hard to try and prevent, especially head injuries, because, they're trying to make it where, you don't duck your head when you hit, can't do unnecessary contact above the shoulder. All these rules they're trying to implement. But at the end of the day, it's such a violent game. You can't, try to restrict someone's ability to hit, because at the end of the day, concussion can really happen on any play. You can simply make contact and get a concussion, or your head can bounce off the turf and get a concussion. So it's so hard to kind of regulate that. But I think a rule change like changing the kickoff, or, trying to eliminate these high risk plays, high risk moments where concussions happen, and, they're taken out of the game altogether, or just modifying where you're giving it less opportunity to really get some serious injuries, then, that's why I think they can start making headroom. But, compared to NASCAR, you can tell that their safety of the drivers is the first priority. And you just want to see the NFL come out and, admit their findings of what they have. Because I know they have findings on CTE, and that, football can very well cause CTE, stop trying to, I get that, it's kind of the business investment, and that they have to protect their bottom line. But at the same time, you cannot pretend like there's not former players out here with CTE and, some recent tragedies that have happened over the last couple of years with football players, committing suicide or things along those lines are really, our health has gone really, really south. So you just want to see them to have that commitment to making changes to, I'm not going to say prevent what is just going to happen, unfortunately, but really for the best interest in players, not only in the league right now, but, future days and going into the future of really protecting them with life outside of football.
Right. There's only so much you can do to take away the physical and contact parts of football. When we come back, we're going to talk more about what NASCAR did individually, both the Hans device and the additions to the helmet. But first, a word from one of our sponsors.
This is True Sports, a TrueChat original podcast with your host, Caleb Spinner.
Welcome back. We've been talking about NASCAR, specifically the wreck that Ryan Newman had in this year's Daytona 500, how it was eerily similar to the fatal crash that killed Dale Earnhardt Sr., and what NASCAR has done since 2001 to improve the safety of their drivers and how we could potentially relate these back to the NFL, a very, very physical sport that has been under fire from specialists for its lack of player safety, or its accused lack of player safety, especially in the concussion department. We have Devin Jackson with us, a multimedia journalist from Pittsburgh. Devin, the first thing I want to look at is the Hans system, and we talked about it in the first segment. It's a system that sounds like something the NFL could modify to prevent concussions and severe head injuries, because it minimizes movement of a driver's head in a wreck like this. Could we see a similar device brought into the NFL within the next couple of years?
It's kind of hard because you want to be able to move your neck through peripheral vision football and, still have that full range of motion. And, the Hans system, is, kind of designed to, kind of restrict the movement of your head and stabilize your neck and everything. So I guess it really depends on, maybe a position, but I don't know, maybe something smaller or something, not as complex or as structured as NASCAR. Because at the end of the day, NASCAR, you do have to have your peripheral, but football, you have to constantly keep your head on the swivel, But I think maybe it's something they at least look into, or something they may try and test out, but I don't know if it's something that can be replicable for football, just due to how much players need to see, full side to side. Especially, blindside blocks are getting, kind of taken out of the league, but at the same time, you still need to be able to see what's coming towards you or at you, even out the side of your eye, So I just kind of worry that, maybe, while I think it will be a nice addition, I just don't know if the functionality will help, kind of prevent these head injuries.
Right. And obviously it wouldn't be a direct adoption of this device into the NFL. The actual Hans device covers most of a driver's torso and then really goes up to the back of the neck as well. So it's not practical to adopt the whole thing into the NFL. But JD, what do you think? Could we see a similar device, something a bit smaller and more compact, come into the NFL?
Well, I think one of the big things right now that they need to focus on is maybe not like inside the helmet, but definitely on the field. Because when you look under that turf, what's under the turf? Usually like concrete, maybe even straight ground. So I think putting something under there. Now, one of the other things I wanted to mention about NASCAR keeping their drivers safe is they have a barrier system within the steel. There's this absorbent foam that helps kind of take away some of the energy, absorb a lot of the energy from collisions into the wall. Maybe if you see a process similar to that under the turf, maybe some air pockets under the turf that's going to take away a lot of that energy that happens from the collision of the head to the ground. If you see a tool like that maybe used under the turf, or maybe even under that little bead substance that they have under the turf, then that's something that could take away a lot of the energy that players are going to take from the collisions into the ground. But I think the hands system, it's going to be really tough to implement that into the NFL because it does restrict your movement. And I mean, you see players right now, they don't even have knee pads because a lot of it restricts their movements. A lot of them have no shoulder pads or very little shoulder pads.
They're basically shorts that they wear.
Basically. And you don't see a lot of these pads anymore that we had to wear in Pee Wee and middle school football because it restricts their movement. So I think you have to get the player committee on board, the player union, on board to install some kind of system like that. Yeah,
I agree. I see what you're talking about. I like the air pocket thing. I've never thought about that. That's a good idea. When
it was always been one of my dreams. I've had that kind of thought in my mind since I was 12 years old, and I was like, that's gonna be my first invention when I'm out of college. I'm creating some kind of air pocket system for under the turf, and I've had that dream for a long time now.
Well, you're gonna be going to school to become an architect, so maybe you can design the first stadium with air pockets underneath the turf.
That would be nice.
Who knows? That'd be one way to get your name out. The second thing NASCAR changed was the design of the helmets worn by drivers. I remember watching the video of Dale Earnhardt Sr.'s fatal wreck. I wasn't alive then, believe it or not. If that's probably going to date some of our viewers. But back then they had the sides of the driver's head covered, the back and the top. There was nothing in the front of the helmet. Now, of course, we have the very iconic full enclosed helmets with the visors in the front. Devin, the NFL has looked a lot at helmet design and what's the best way to go when designing a helmet to keep a player's head in mind and keep it protected. Have we looked at the helmets too much? Is there anything more we can do, or have we not done enough yet?
I won't say that they haven't done enough, but not in, regards to helmets. I think that's probably the main thing that they've looked into and certainly invested in. But at the end of the day, you have to make, like JD was saying, like you have to make the field, more friendly, to the body and to the head. I mean, even back in the days I played football, there was like little concrete underneath the turf. So if the turf is not well kept, obviously this is not the NFL issue, but just an overall issue, if the turf is not well kept, like you're going to hit straight concrete, and that can be really dangerous, with a head bouncing off concrete, in a helmet as well. So I think in terms of helmets, I think they've done their job in terms of researching and trying to invest in some of the state of the art helmets that, is trying to minimize, the potential of head injuries and trying to find ways that it bounces, like the impact bounces off the materials inside the helmet and trying to get some sort of, bounce off so it's not, hitting against the head and making the brain jiggle, inside, therefore causing concussion. But, like I said, in terms of helmets, I think they've done, a great job of just research and trying to make it everything possible. But they also need to start looking at those other elements. So kind of answer your question, yes, they need to look at the other things outside the helmet. They kind of not overdone the helmets, but they've done what they needed to with helmets. But now it's time to look at some of the other things. Like, I mean, we're talking about concussions, but just kind of the overall thing of their equipment is not great, not wearing knee pads or, the shoulder pads are a lot lighter than usual. So you want to see them put more emphasis on that. And then, of course, like I was saying earlier, the kickoff format, change that, because you just literally have people running full speed at people that are trying to set up and make blocks. And we've just seen some really, really bad injuries over the years, especially with kickoffs. And they're trying to eliminate certain blocks and everything. So my big thing is adopt that XFL style type of kickoff where, you have the teams 5 yards apart. And that way I'm not going to say it's going to prevent injuries or reduce them necessarily, but the chance of someone getting knocked out cold on the field is decreasing, if you're not having somebody run full speed at you, what are you going to do? It sucks because a lot of those guys don't play, offense or defense. Special teams is their place. And I get that, a lot of people make their living on being the fastest guy down to get the kickoff. But at the same time, it still can be, a good way to have those guys still make a roster, everything like that. I'm trying a little bit of tangent, but to answer your question, they need to work on those other things outside of helmets, because they definitely focus in on helmets. But, the field that JD was mentioning, the conditions on the field, eliminating the kickoff and or modifying it, things like that, I think need to be taken into account.
I think I've made it abundantly clear by now on the show, or if you follow my Twitter, you'll know I am not in favor of restricting hits at least any further than what we have now. I think the quarterbacks have it too easy, to put it bluntly. So I don't think there's anything, I don't want there to be any other restrictions to how hard you can hit somebody other than what currently exists now. I think, JD, you're with me on that. But this is where I think that turf idea, the air pockets underneath the AstroTurf or whatever you have in your stadium, is good because it's not taking away from the hit, which is a big part of football. It's making sure the landing is smoother.
Right, because you see a lot of the guys, look at Teddy Bridgewater when he got knocked out in that game against Florida back in college. The hit that he took was hard, but the hit that he took off of the field was even harder. So which one knocked him out? It's we don't really know. But I do agree with, I don't want any more rules. I don't want the NFL to turn into flag football. And really their equipment's not the greatest either. I did want to mention, have you seen girls football by any chance? They wear the smallest shoulder pads. They have very few knee pads, and they just wear straight helmets. And you don't hear, them. I don't know if maybe it's just not televised or maybe it's not talked about enough, but you don't hear them having any problems with the CTE or concussions or anything like that. And not to age anybody, but back in the 80s or 90s, these players, they hit harder than these players do now, I think. And you don't hear them complaining about CTE problems or concussion problems. So I think it's definitely an equipment problem. I know that they've added some kind of protection with the helmets that have the little hexagon cut out in the front that's supposed to add extra padding. But even with those, you're still getting concussion problems. But I think they've done enough with the helmets. Maybe do a little more with the rest of the equipment going around. And then, like I said, the air pockets under the turf. I need someone to make that a big idea right now and give me some credit for it.
You need a patent.
I know, I really do.
You need a patent as soon as possible because you're 18 right now.
Yeah.
So you could, but as soon as somebody hears this and they say that would be a good idea, you're not going to get credit for it. Somebody's going to go off and running with the idea. So you need to get that legally protected as soon as possible. TrueChat's mission is to educate people by providing honest, open, and respectful conversations. TrueChat is the company that runs this show and the network that we broadcast on. If you think we're not upholding this mission at any time during today's episode, email your grievance to ethics@truechat.org. That's ethics@truechat.org. Stay in touch with True Sports by visiting our website, truesportspodcast.com, and by following @truesports_pod on Twitter and Instagram. Before we wrap up today's show, we're going to take a minute to hear from one of our sponsors.
This is True Sports, a TrueChat original podcast with your host, Caleb Spinner.
Welcome back. We've been talking with Devin Jackson, a multimedia journalist and digital content producer at WTAJ, a news station in Pittsburgh. He's a Saints fan. We talked about what his thoughts on Drew Brees coming back. And the main part of the show, we focused on talking about NASCAR, how this Ryan Newman crash that just happened at the 2020 Daytona 500 was similar to the one that killed Dale Earnhardt Sr. in 2001, and what NASCAR did to make sure that drivers were safer and how we could implement some of those changes into the NFL, an organization that was widely criticized for its lack of player safety. Now we're going to look at some other ways the NFL can improve the safety of its players. Sure, NASCAR had a couple, but now we're going to look at the XFL, something we touched on also during the time on this show today. The Extreme Football League, or the XFL as it's more commonly known, returned to screens this year after a decade and a half hiatus with a new focus on player safety. For example, the league has positioned players closer together on kickoffs and delayed the time players can move until the returner has possession of the ball, something that they say will minimize the high-speed collisions that the NFL has by putting teams on complete other sides of the field and yelling go, letting them go at each other. The XFL has done something revolutionary in all of their rules, but this one especially. What other rules can the NFL adopt to make sure its players stay as safe as possible?
I think that there's really not much else they can do. Football is such a violent game. Like, there's only so much you can do to really try and prevent injury. I mean, at the end of the day, you just have to let them play. I mean, it's just difficult to try and, say, here's this, and this that they can do to prevent head injuries. Like, it just doesn't work like that for football, because like any play, any time, like an injury can happen. I mean, all you can do really is teach players how to safely hit, how to safely make contact, keep your head up, when you're making a hit. But at the end of the day, it's gonna happen. I mean, there's really no way to avoid it. Just like hockey always has its injuries, football is gonna have its injuries. I mean, it's just part of the game. Yeah, it's really difficult. Like I said, we talked about ideas where they can try and reduce these head injuries, but at the end of the day, it's going to be football. It's going to involve people getting hit, and it's really going to come down to the other little things that they implement to try to and really, try to reduce it. But at the end of the day, there's really not much you can do in preventing head injuries with football. You just have to hit people. I think you have to make contact every play. It's really no avoidable way to reduce injuries that, or anything further that they can do. Anything past that, we're looking into flag football territory, it's just happened. It's just part of the game, unfortunately. I mean, there's really not much they can do else.
Every sport will. That's the nature of the game. Every sport's going to have its injuries. JD, you have something to follow that?
Yeah, and I think one of the things that we can blame these unfundamental or hits that lack fundamental is the fact that media, they kind of televise all the big hits. I mean, you can go on YouTube right now and look up NFL biggest hits, and you'll find 60,000 plus results. Now guys are going after these big hits, whether it's fundamental hits or not. They'll put their head down and go right at someone if it means, hey, I'm going to get the big talk about after this game.
I'm going to make the compilation.
Absolutely. I'm going to make the next big YouTube compilation, or I'm going to be on some NFL memes page on Instagram or whatever. But one of the things that me and my dad, we talk about a lot when it comes to this, NFL players getting CTE, and then they're immediately coming after the league about it, is this is what you signed up for. This is what you're getting paid thousands and millions of dollars to do, is to play football. You know the dangers when you sign up for the game. You know that you're going to be taking a beating. You know it's going to be a consistent beating week after week after week. You know this stuff when you sign up. So the fact that, you retire from the league and then you start having health problems and then you're like, well, the NFL didn't do anything to protect me, or I didn't know that this was going to happen. Yeah, you did. You've been playing this sport all your life. You know how football can take a toll on your health. You kind of knew this stuff when you signed up and when you signed that big dollar contract. Another thing is I hear a lot about players who they have concussion-like symptoms, and then they're just telling the coach, I want to go back in, I want to play. That's great. I love that your will to win is that big, but you also need to look out for your health. I mean, Cam Newton, I think, was a great example a couple years ago. He was clearly showing signs of a concussion, but he was just right there in Ron Rivera's ear going, put me back in, put me back in, put me back in. They put him back in, and then there was this whole thing about, they let him play with a concussion. Well, now you got your whole coaching organization in trouble because of your will to win was so big. And, you want to look for players that want to win that badly, but you also need to be smart about it. If they're experiencing concussion-like symptoms, definitely keep them out. So it's an organization problem. It's a team problem. It's also a personal problem. If you know that you're not feeling 100%, don't put yourself out there.
You're jeopardizing your career.
Absolutely.
And if you really care for the team, then you'll know it's best for the team if you take a break. We talked about it in our load management episode, how we admire the will to get back out there. We understand that you want to go out, you want to play the game, you want to make sure that we're earning every bit of the money that we pay you, but you're also hurting our investment and yourself, your potential career, your potential earnings, if you go in gung-ho saying, I want to play.
Absolutely.
That's not good for anybody.
And absolutely. And all the management sees is just the player's just a giant dollar sign. That's all that
for most managers.
For most managers, your player's just one giant contract. He's an investment. So if he's putting himself out there at risk of being injured for an entire season or maybe the rest of his career, they're not going to be too happy about that either. So that's something else to think about.
We've talked about several ways to keep your investments, whether they're in NASCAR or the NFL, safe. Let's get into our agree to disagree question of the day. For new listeners and those who may not be familiar with this segment, JD and Devin will each have 1 minute to answer a topic-related question submitted by a member of the audience. Today's question is, are the Saints poised to win the Super Bowl next year? Devin, you're our guest. You take this first.
The Saints fan of me wants to say yes, they're poised to win. But I would like to see some things improve. One being, finding a second receiver outside of Michael Thomas. I mean, we're good off on record for most receptions in the season, almost the player of the year. But I'm just not sold on their current roster right now. Plus what they do in the draft and what they do in free agency. So I think they'll be in a running, but I'm not going to go as far as say poised to win. I think, playoff arguments are still on their mind, but at the same time, they will have to. They'll have another good season, I think. But I think they need to ask I can see they're poised to win the Super Bowl.
No, I agree, and I said that last year and the year before when everyone was like, "Well, the Saints are going to make this huge Super Bowl run." I thought they should have been there when they played the Rams and the whole pass interference call went down, but I don't want to bring that up because I know that's probably still a touchy subject for Saints fans out there, but they really need to find another receiver. And Drew Brees is a great quarterback, but you can't put trash around him other than Michael Thomas, and expect that that's going to carry your offense. And I have a great running back in Alvin Kamara. I thought he was a little underused this year. He wasn't as big this year as he was last year. I think they're in good contentions to make a good playoff run, but I don't know about Super Bowl contenders because look at all the teams that are going to be returning. I mean, the 49ers and Chiefs, they're not going anywhere. You got the Packers who are in the NFC. They're not going anywhere. I think the playoffs are going to be really interesting this year if this new 7-team per conference playoffs kind of play out. It's going to be interesting to see a playoffs because we've never seen an NFL playoffs like this. We're going to have more wild card games. You're going to have less buys, and most teams are going to be playing an extra game. So I think this playoff is going to be really interesting, but I think the Saints are in good contention for the Super Bowl, but I don't know about poised to win it.
Yeah, I agree with both of you guys. It's a little far of a jump. It's too far of a jump for me to immediately go from a Saints team who has been decent in the playoffs, who has gotten robbed the past 2 years, to put it lightly, to all of a sudden Super Bowl favorites, Super Bowl champs even, going into this next season. I think there's too many good teams. The Ravens, I think, are one that are poised, that are in a good position, I'll say, to make a Super Bowl run. The Chiefs, obviously, are in a good spot to repeat. The 49ers have vengeance on their mind. They could make it back. I know you're rolling your head at me, but I'm naming people that could make a better run or are in a better spot, better spot than the Saints.
I think as long as you have Drew Brees on your team, you're going to be poised to at least have a good shot at the Super Bowl. Lamar Jackson, his playoff performance in his first 2 seasons are awful. And then on the 49ers point, I don't know if I trust Jimmy G to win a Super Bowl, frankly. And I said it the couple shows before the Super Bowl. I just don't think that Jimmy G has enough in the tank to win a Super Bowl. They're going to need to put a lot of weapons around him.
Well, he almost did.
Yeah, almost only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades, buddy.
Right.
You can't almost win a Super Bowl. So I think that Jimmy G just doesn't have what it takes yet to win a Super Bowl. He's still considered a little bit young.
Talking one more time about the Saints and who they can pick up. Looking at the free agency list for this year, you've got some great names here. A.J. Green from the Cincinnati Bengals, he's an unrestricted free agent. Emmanuel Sanders from San Francisco. Devin Funchess, who's a reliable option. Amari Cooper, a big star from the Cowboys. You've got those pieces in free agency. I'm not sure off the top of my head how much cap space the Saints have, but if you want to be in Super Bowl contention going into next year after this offseason, you can be. There's guys out there that if the Saints are aggressive enough in contract pursuit, and if they make sure that they have enough space and they're playing this safely with their existing contracts, they can be in that spot going into this year. They've still got some time. Here's the only question, though, is that the attitude that the Saints are going into this offseason with? Are they trying to become Super Bowl frontrunners by adding free agents? Are they looking at what we're saying and seeing that they're not ready right now, but they could be if they add one or two more guys? I'm not sure if that's the mindset in New Orleans, but it very well could be. We'll see when free agency starts. JD, I have a boring weekend. Give me something to watch. Swenson's Games of the Week.
Alrighty, well, the XFL is always exciting. And if you haven't seen an XFL game, you really need to.
You really do.
You really need to.
You really do.
This isn't the AAF like of a couple years ago. This is the XFL. This is going to be hopefully a successful league. And
there are some people who even live in my house who I've been recommending the XFL to, but they haven't seen a game yet.
Right.
What are you doing?
You need to see the XFL. And one of the games in particular, I think it's going to be the best game this week, is going to be the Houston Roughnecks at the Dallas Renegades. Now, football in Texas, I don't know.
Ooh.
I was going to say, I don't know. Football in Texas is a whole different breed down there.
Cross-state rivalry.
Absolutely. And this is going to be Houston versus Dallas. I mean, that's in the NFL, it's a big thing because it's two Texas teams going against each other right now. Houston hasn't lost. And Dallas.
And they've looked good in every win.
They've looked good. And sometimes it's hard to tell because right now we're only in week 4, so you don't really know how good these teams truly are. I think this game right here is going to be a test of both teams' strengths. How good are you really? So in that one, I'm a Dallas fan, but I'm going to pick Houston. I really don't think it matters that Dallas is playing at home.
PJ Walker has been something else.
Right.
Too.
He had that insane sidearm throw earlier last week. And that's something you see from like Patrick Mahomes. Not an XFL quarterback, so he's extremely impressive.
Yeah, that was impressive 2 weeks ago.
And then heading over to the NBA, we're going to have the small ball Houston Rockets at the Boston Celtics. Now, the only thing that concerns me right now is the health of Kemba Walker. If he's not good to go, then I don't know if the Celtics are winning this one, but it's at Boston. You know, Houston, they can put up some serious points. But I'll tell you what, Jason Tatum is playing out of his mind this year. And I think he was one of the best draft picks that the Celtics could have gotten out of that draft. So I'm going to go with the Boston Celtics, but it's going to be an extremely high-scoring game. I'm interested to see what the over-under is. They don't have one right now, but I'm telling you, over-under is going to be like 250. It's going to be a high-scoring game.
That'll be a great one. Devin, thank you so much for coming on. It was a pleasure having you. We hope to have you on again sometime in the future.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I definitely enjoyed the conversation today.
Let us know your thoughts on today's episode on social media at TrueSports_pod. Also, make sure you visit TrueSportsPodcast.com to listen to previous episodes and to read the True Sports blog. New articles of the blog are posted Mondays and Fridays, so there's always something to keep you involved and entertained at TrueSportsPodcast.com. Once again, thanks to Devin Jackson for coming in and recording with us today for True Sports. In Urbana, Ohio, I'm Caleb Spinner.
And I'm Jay Swenson.
Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you next Wednesday. But for now, that's the show. We're out of here.